Hello, welcome to another episode of the podcast Encrypted Minds. My name is Edwin Karlas, founder of Level Up Sales Consultancy. And for the people who don't know me or what I do, I help SaaS and cybersecurity companies scale their business. So if you want to know more about your growth plans or discuss about your ideas of gaining market share next year, please let me know in a direct message. I would like to introduce Joshua Eidelman. I'm really pleased that you're here, Joshua. I admire you as an entrepreneur and also the things you've done so far. So thank you for attending Encrypted Minds. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, Edwin, thank you so much for having me on today. Great to, dive into a little bit more about my background and also learn more about your consulting practice. At high level, I run a business process outsourcing firm called NeoWork, and we help tech companies in the US build operations teams in Colombia and the Philippines.
All right, so you're working out of the US, working on Philippines and Colombia. So you're working on 3 continents.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm actually in Medellin, Colombia right now. But yeah, when people ask where I'm from or where I live, I never really have a good answer. So it's a little bit all over the place.
All right, so you seem to be part of NeoWork yourself. You just live everywhere, right? Yeah. So may I ask, what was the initial idea from starting NeoWork?
Yeah, I'm happy to dive into the origin story. So back in 2017, after college, I moved to Colombia. I came for a 1 week trip that's turned into 8 years, on and off. Yeah, I moved here, started my first business, actually building training courses in augmented reality. So we were training plumbers and electricians through AR on how to handle equipment that they don't physically have or how to handle, dangerous environments. And I never got product market fit with that first business, but it was my first exposure to the level of talent here in Colombia. We had a team of engineers and 3D modelers based here and really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there's so much incredible talent around the world. And my MO is that there isn't an inequality of talent, just an inequality of opportunities worldwide. And that's really what motivates me is being able to connect top talent from around the world to work with US based companies. After that first business, this was in early 2018. I flew to LA to as like a last ditch effort to try to get some VC money to extend our runway. And I remember coming off of the LAX airport and seeing all these scooters flying around. And I'm like, what are these electric scooters? What are these things? And a month later, decided to wrap up that first business and applied and started working at Bird, the first electric scooter company. And this was when they were in their early days in hyper growth mode. We hit $1 billion valuation in the first 6 months and then $2.2 billion valuation in the first 9 months. So it was incredible growth, launching 3 cities every single week, and pretty incredible to see the inside of what being in a rocket ship like that looks like. And one of my early projects with Bird was, we were growing so fast that we couldn't hire internally quickly enough. So actually, I went over to the Philippines to find a BPO business process outsourcing partner for Bird to work with. And I was sitting in the customer shoes, interfacing with these larger BPOs, and I saw what worked well and what didn't work, and you know, found a couple of pain points just on my end, sitting in the customer shoes between how some of the contracts were structured, how the teams were treated, and high turnover rates that I saw with traditional BPOs. So yeah, really started NeoWork to be a new method of work and to solve for all of those pain points I felt and really building a BPO that's tailored fit for a high growth startup and more flexible with arrangements that a startup needs.
So if I understand correctly, you worked for literally a rocket ship. Valuations, you quite literally exploding the valuation of this company, and still you decided, you know what I'm going to do? To start my own company. So you just took a deep dive and say, all right, let's see what happened, because you were also confident about the future of a BPO. What makes you decide also to leave such an interesting job for yourself?
I've always been entrepreneurial. I grew up with a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were in childcare and education. So, growing up, every dining room table was like a conference table.
Yeah.
And then even, in school, I had little businesses. In college, I had a laundry delivery business. So all that to say is that I don't think I make the best employee. If there's a decision I disagree with, it's really tough for me to just say yes. And yeah, I find it easier from my end to just to the kind of crazy manic entrepreneur life than to be an employee.
Yeah. Interesting, because from a European perspective, we see the United States as the number one place to also to start your business. Everybody seems to be very entrepreneurial. Everybody is sales minded. You try something, if it works, you expand. If it doesn't work, you try something else. Can you also, so you've worked in the US, you worked in the Philippines, and now in South America. Can you just explain a little bit about the difference between those countries with regards to doing business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, high level, just from a legal entity setup, structure, banking, you know, most business processes, US is a lot easier. I think that's a big value add of working with a company like NeoWork for US businesses is that we handle all of the admin and HR of, figuring out health insurance and the Philippines and, the 13th month pay in Colombia and all of these, HR requirements. So, yeah, that is frankly, it's more of a headache to set it up, and that's part of our value prop. Um, but I would say a big difference is just more in the team dynamics, more than anything. So in the Philippines, the sense of kapwa or community is much more important for Philippines-based employees than in the US. So really being intentional about getting the team together for karaoke nights and even like virtual events and just making sure that teammates feel like they belong and fit in with the broader community is a lot more important than, a US based employee that just wants to clock in, clock out, and then hang out with their family and friends. And, that's, they're happy with just that setup. In the Philippines, it's much more important to feel like they belong. And we've found that that's been a secret sauce too for driving, retention rates is helping our teammates feel like they've got that support system instead of just being by themselves, lonely, in a remote work setup. I'd say another, key difference, I can talk about Colombia now, is that in Colombia, prioritizing family is even more important than in the US, I would say. So just, 2 days ago was Dia de las Velas in Colombia, a day, really intended for, well, do you like candles, but it's really more about gratitude for your family and being with loved ones. And really the whole month of December is like that. And from an operations standpoint, it's just really important to be able to respect that culture and plan for those days off while maintaining operations coverage for your accounts. So yeah, things that, maybe seem kind of surface level, um, different than US really are profoundly different with the work setup and just how to most smartly and best accommodate for what these different cultures really value and what's gonna keep them motivated and stay with you long term.
That's quite an interesting story, because it seems to be quite the opposite uh, um, with regards of the services you provide. You provide people with remote workers, your customers remote workers, while just family and the community is so important in the Philippines and Colombia. But they're serving customers abroad. They're serving customers in other time zones.
Right.
How do you bridge that gap between the services you provide with people remotely and the community, the importance of community on the other side?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we're very intentional with our recruitment of basically recruiting out of pods. So for two reasons. One is while they are all remote workers, we want them to be in geographic hubs close to each other. For reason number one is to have that sense of community, to make it easy for them to meet up for dinners, for team events. And also for number two is for having backup sites, which is even more critical in the Philippines where the infrastructure is not as strong. So they can, if they're in close geographic hubs with each other, we have backup sites where they can go with Starlink internet and backup generator whenever there's typhoons or extended internet outages. Um, and yeah, while we are a remote first company, and I do think that's the best way to attract and retain top talent in the Philippines and Colombia, where the commutes are a lot more intense than what we're used to in the West. I I still ascribe to the pod structure where it is easy to just geographically get everyone together occasionally for those meetups.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, your reviews are incredibly good. So your customers are really happy with your services. And what I also liked, Joshua, about on your website is that the introduction of your team members is not just a small text, but you decided to let them select a couple of songs from Spotify.
Yeah.
So it was a nice way also to meet your team members. I like these kind of details, and it says something about your company culture. If you look back in the past couple of years, so before you have a successful company as NeoWork is right now, what are the challenges you need to overcome before you just figured out how it should work?
Yeah. I think failing in my previous companies helped a lot. That's the best teacher is failure of, like between the business model I wanted to structure and between trying to be VC backed versus bootstrapped. I learned the hard way that, bootstrapped is the way to go for
Is
me
the
at
way to go,
least.
yes?
Yep, yep. And yeah, high level, just another really core thing was learning more about just what's the pain points that I'm solving for. And I think the best businesses are the ones where the founders have felt the pain point themselves.
Yes.
So I really was attracted to the idea of starting a BPO because I was intimately close to what the BPO experience was like from the customer's ends, from my work at Bird, and really knew what I wanted to solve for and how to differentiate from all the other BPOs out there because it's a very fragmented market. There's thousands of BPOs out there, and how to make work stand out and be niche enough.
Can you just explain one more time what BPO means? Because I just realized that we know what it is, but I can imagine that not everybody understands what a BPO
Yeah, there's
does.
lots of acronyms.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it stands for business process outsourcing. But essentially it's helping, companies in the US or Europe or Australia, being able to not only recruit talent abroad, but also manage them, run their payroll and benefits, and yeah, do the ongoing performance management. So defining what the most important metrics are, having that manager layer, the QA, quality assurance layer, trainers to set up the team, and really being an extension of your company's internal team. So let's say you're a tech company and need help with technical support. You can partner with a BPO that essentially becomes your technical support department. So they handle all the new hiring, they handle the training for low performers, they handle the PIP setup and coaching and replacements if needed. And yeah, we are the execution arm for tech companies.
Yeah. And you work also in the time zones of your respective customers.
Exactly. Yep. So it's kind of interesting in the Philippines. There's this whole subculture of Filipinos that have worked their whole careers on the overnight shifts aligned with the US. And you'll get to a Starbucks there and at 3 a.m. it's a party. um, and yeah, so we've got a whole team based in the Philippines that work overnight US shift, but also we've got other shift plans. We have 24/7 operations. So at any given time, there's a neo worker that's helping with some of our partners.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is amazing. How many people are working in the Philippines in total for NeoWork currently?
Yep. So we're at 260 total, and 230 of those are in Philippines. Majority Philippines based.
Yeah. Well, nice. And the majority of your customers, because they have in a global scale, but where do they come from? Is it mostly US or is it
US. Yep, majority
US?
US based.
Yeah. And what is a typical customer that is a fit for NeoWork? Is it the
Yeah,
skill
there's
up or some other things that are characteristics that
yeah, typically tech companies between seed stage and Series B is kind of our sweet spot where, they're still looking for help with defining processes, setting up SOPs. That's our strength. I'd also, we're niching down even more into different verticals. So our three main verticals now are health tech companies. We work with a lot of, health tech marketplaces. So think of them kind of like Uber for nurses. Our other vertical is video games. Working with more and more gaming companies. And this is our my fellow Dutch colleague, Rob. Shout out Rob. He is, really well connected in the video game space and is our chief growth officer that's expanding that vertical. And then finally, AI training. So this is a really compelling service of being able to help companies train their models, ranging from basic things like image labeling to more advanced things like supervised fine tuning, but basically having that human input. And after thousands of inputs, us helping eventually automate out our own jobs and, better refining models that these startups are using as the base of their product.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, you mentioned AI. It seems that a lot of it replicating parts of your job are going to be outsourced to artificial intelligence. Do you see an uptick in also the request of your services?
Yeah, and certainly AI training is a rapidly growing vertical for us. And I think a lot of the larger BPOs they see AI kind of as an existential threat to their business because they focus on more of the basic, like tier one chat support, and they've already invested in these huge office buildings with thousands of employees doing these more basic roles. But at NeoWork, we're small enough where, we really are leaning into AI and we want to disrupt ourselves. And, I'm a believer that, there's like more very basic repetitive tier one roles that can and should be automated because they aren't the most compelling work for people. And we want to, upskill our team and have them work on more creative problem solving and more driving impact and value for clients instead of just low level repetitive work. So yeah, we're really trying to shift just the narrative around AI that most of the larger BPOs have, and really embracing it internally. And I really find it exciting about what we can do in the future of, instead of the traditional BPO model of billing by hours worked, transforming more and more towards billing based off of results, and number of workflows completed or number of value driven for our end customers by leveraging AI and still keeping that human in the loop layer, which I find really critical for most of our workflows, especially in the health tech space, to have that layer of review and QA. But yeah, all that to say is that AI is really key to embrace for BPOs, I feel. And I think that a fellow BPO owner recently told me that the BPO industry is kind of like Blockbuster, just as Netflix was coming around, and it's really at an inflection point, the whole industry. And it's now time to embrace online streaming instead of sticking to the brick and mortar, picking up DVDs setup.
Yeah, I like the metaphor. So you embrace AI as an opportunity, not as a threat.
Exactly. Yep.
Where are we heading? What is NeoWork? What is the industry doing in 3 years from now?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot more of high level talent profiles that instead of them doing the work, they are supervising agentic AI doing the work. I think you'll see even more and more of specialized type roles. A lot of people currently they think of the Philippines for basic VAs or chat support, but there's incredible talent over there for more director level roles and strategic leadership roles. So more global staffing for again for those higher level high impact roles, and really just doubling down on our partnerships. We already as a BPO, we already know our operations of our clients extremely well. We're handling their operations day to day, and I foresee more and more companies, looking to a BPO as not just handling the staffing layer, but really being their consultants for all things technical support, and how to set up the proper CRM, how to set up the proper chatbot and AI tools, and going beyond the staffing layer to really owning the full cycle of companies' customer support, for example.
And this is what NeoWork can help with. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. What are you're a positive guy. You see opportunities. You see threats, or don't see threats. You see the opportunity. But I can also imagine that you have some challenges to overcome before you're there. What kind of challenges you're predicting for companies like yourself that are transitioning to more global
Yeah,
situation?
one big one is just changing the talent profile that we bring on. A lot of BPOs, NeoWork included, we did our recruitment based off of their English skills and their level of empathy, and not necessarily based off of their interest in AI in a couple of years back. Yeah, I think one of the challenges that a lot of BPOs, including New York, face is just getting really aggressive with the timelines of upskilling our teammates to embrace AI in their daily workflows, and to, instead of, going first towards asking their, supervisor for help, being able to go first towards troubleshooting independently with an LLM's help. So yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, and certainly something that's adjusting with the new talent profiles that we bring on board. But yeah, I think, and not just BPOs, most companies are facing that challenge right now of how to embrace AI. Not just having AI, like the leadership team throwing it at their employees and expecting them to use this tool that they bought, but instead, the C-suite team being the ones to really set the model of how I use AI internally, and how, other teammates can model what I do. And yeah, really just making it a kind of fundamental shift in the DNA of the company.
Yeah, yeah, and I fully agree on this on this part, Joshua. So I'm using AI in my business as well. But the thing I see within my prospect, also the people I speak to, is that they are using AI, but they don't have the problem what to solve. So there's some unclarity about what to do with AI. Everybody talks about it. I personally believe that you need to understand the process before you can implement AI and do it properly, like I'm doing in my outbound systems and also my sales methodology. But I also see a shift towards an increased use of BPOs, because with everybody's using video calls nowadays, and if you can can speak to a real person wherever he or she is, it doesn't matter anymore. So we have this call. You're from Colombia. I'm in Rotterdam, based out of Rotterdam, and we talk to each other if you're just sitting in the other side of the table. So that also is the situation for your virtual assistants of people you hire via BPO. If they do the work properly, who cares where they are? But I also see a
Exactly.
fundamental threat from a geopolitical. No, not geopolitical. I think from a local perspective, and it triggered me. You said about the incredible resource of talent in the Philippines and Colombia. It reminds me of a situation I encountered a couple of years ago when I used to work with big enterprises. So the Netherlands has some big companies like big banks, but also Unilever, Philips, Shell. And on a certain moment, I was talking to people from India who are incredibly smart. But now I need to talk to business level, to the DMU is already sitting in India. And I see this as a threat for your local communities if you're not only outsourcing for the cheaper labor, but if you recognize that the cheaper labor can also provide very high value, why hire local if you can just hire top talent from a BPO? I think this can be a risk for the old-fashioned companies. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And I found too that, companies that are still resistant to using global talent, their competitors already are doing that, and, it's really impacting their margins, and to stay competitive, they really do need to embrace AI and global talent. This is really the new way of doing things, and, yeah, kind of finding the right roles for those local employees, which I typically find are, in those client-facing type roles, where they really excel. But yeah, really kind of blending your workforce to be able to fit 2025 and soon to be 2026 norms.
Yeah, yes, I see what you mean. So this is the business. This is where we're heading to. What about yourself, Joshua? You're an entrepreneurial type. You already explained it from how you came to the decision to start your own company. Um, can you explain a little bit, or tell us how your journey went?
Yeah. You know, I also have worked at a number of startups, like through internships and when I was early out of college, and always fascinated by startups. I think I don't have the patience to work at a larger company with more bureaucracy. Like the setup of being able to wear multiple hats and just finding ways to add value. But but yeah, I really, attribute a lot to where NeoWork is at today from my time at Bird, and kind of seeing that growth and just being surrounded by a bunch of incredibly talented, super smart people during those early Bird days, and learning from them. And a lot of them I still work with to this day. A lot of them have gone on to start their own companies. And a lot of them have, you know, taken on leadership roles at other tech firms that we partner with now. So yeah, eternally grateful to
Uh,
the early
that,
experiences that were.
that sounds very good. All right, what? Let's state. Uh, uh, I will state it differently. What advice would you give to younger Joshua
What
when you
advice would I
started
give?
your work? Yeah, if you can
Yeah,
go back, what would your advice be?
I would say just learning to fully trust and delegate earlier on. There were a lot of, points in the business, and still to this day, if I'm being honest with myself, where there's some parts of the business where, I'm resistant to let go of, because either I find it as a skill set that I have and I want to, give that impression of adding value with this area that I'm comfortable with, like with recruitment or operations. And yeah, I think, a lot of founders kind of struggle with a little bit of that identity crisis as the company scales bigger. I'd say the biggest advice I would give myself is just delegating sooner, and just evolving from that founder role of being involved with everything to CEO role of being able to direct and be the sounding board, but really having department leads that fully own their respective departments.
What do you like more? What role? The CEO role or more the founder role?
I like the founder role more. I like, getting my hands dirty and getting into the weeds of operations. But I also know that, that's not what's going to be most helpful to NeoWork now. And it's, in a lot of respects, it's kind of delegating away the fun parts of the job to be able to add more value by working on the unknown, working on the more challenging and prone to failure parts of the business of trying out new initiatives, but that's really what's needed at this point for New York.
Can you explain a little bit what is needed right now in your current role? What are the things you're working on currently you need to overcome?
Yeah, I'd say some of the things that only the CEO can really uniquely do. So things like recruitment for, senior level roles. Right now, we're actively recruiting a VP of AI implementation, and it's very, very nuanced, like what that perfect profile would look like, because it's not just someone that's technical that can, implement AI into a lot of our back end and client facing workflows, but also someone that has a lot of the soft skills of being able to really be the AI champion internally at NeoWork and help with the upskilling of our team. So yeah, things like recruitment for that, things like, testing out with trusted partners, new dynamic pricing and new results-based pricing. There's a lot of unknown on, doing our hourly billing model is a lot easier. I just my fractional CFO is able to plug in the margins that we need to stay as a healthy business, and then we just go from there. It's pretty plug and play. Whereas with results-based pricing, there's a lot of factors with like, our startup partners, they change their workflows pretty dramatically week to
Yeah.
week. And how do
Yeah.
we account for having to retool and adjust, and then workflows that we built to account for these new changes in operational processes, or how to build in bulk pricing and volume discounts. Yeah, a lot more nuance to how to figure out pricing, and it's something that we're still actively working on, and I don't have the best answer right now. It's still something that we still need to experiment with, make a couple of mistakes along the way, learn from those mistakes, and fine tune it.
Yeah. Oh, right. That sounds good. And if you agree, I want to circle back to something else you said earlier. You were talking about the difference between VC money and bootstrapped,
Yeah,
and you prefer the latter. Why is
yeah.
that?
Um, I would say the biggest thing is fundraising. That's another full time job to
Yeah.
do it right. And You know, I've got a lot of great founder friends that are incredible at fundraising. Shout out to my friend Sati, that's based in Medellin, parts of the year. He's an incredible fundraiser. That's a skill set that I do not have. I prefer to just work in the business and get things done. I'm an operations guy myself, so I like to just execute rather than having to fundraise and go through those, you know, 50 no's to get one yes. Or that's a pretty good ratio, actually. Usually it's more like 100 or 200 no's. So yeah, high level is really just more of kind of the model I prefer. And frankly, big reason why I started a business is to not have to follow advice or follow heavy influence from VCs that are looking for, high growth model at the expense of profitability, or frankly at the expense of health of the company. They're more looking for growth no matter what. And so yeah, it was very intentional to have a slower growing but more sustainable business model. And yeah, instead of being on a rocket ship, it's fine to be on a sailboat. It can be a nice sailboat, but still a sailboat that's cruising along and just compounding over time.
Yeah. All right. I like the metaphor. As a Dutchman, I can also see what you mean. Hey, may I ask, where's Joshua in 5 years from now? Because you are a seasoned entrepreneur, you have some successes. Where are you going from a personal perspective?
Yeah. On the personal side, hoping to start our family in the next 5 years. I think on the business side, um, you know, exploring other interests. I still love augmented reality. Back in 2017, the hardware was just not there yet. The timing wasn't great. We would uh we'd give these plumbers and electricians these, Microsoft HoloLenses that weighed 10 pounds, and they would put it on, and like 5 minutes later, they're sweating everywhere, and they're like, "Take this shit off of me." So that was kind of defeating. But yeah, I'm very optimistic about where just AR as a technology can go. Watch any Iron Man movie, and you'll see it right there. Instead of having to interface with a phone and typing things out, just being able to have you know, information and 3D models superimposed over your field of vision, I think is really compelling. And yeah, once the hardware improves, or just the form factor to look more like the Meta Ray-Ban lenses of just like a sunglass instead of like a full like current Apple Vision Pro, I think yeah, apps in the AR space will be really compelling. So yeah, to answer your question, I'll wait for like Apple Vision Pro version 4 or version 5 to come out when it's a much smaller form factor, and then potentially look at going into SaaS again in the AR space.
Right. Is there an idea for a new company, maybe?
Yeah, and a really um, big believer, like I said, in AR for not just entertainment, but for training purposes or industrial use cases. Um, I'm very passionate about Medellin, Colombia, so I think like a fun side project would be something tourism related, or even maybe not the best business model, but just like serving my own needs in Medellin. Like there's no good bagel spots in Medellin, so I'll serve my pain point of not having bagels here. Maybe start a bagel shop, but yeah, uh, kind of lots of ideas kind of storming around in the brain.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. So so I know that people out of our network, that's mostly salespeople, are also watching these kind of episodes. You as a CEO, what kind of advice can you give from a business perspective? I can imagine that you will get a lot of proposals from salespeople who want to expand their business. How do you normally deal with these kind of proposals? What is it? What is your take on this one?
Yeah, it's a good question. The vendors that we've worked with, and the salespeople that I've engaged with the most are the ones that really take a consultative approach with us. So I know it sounds pretty basic, but actually spending time, going through the websites, understanding what a BPO is, pain points we're solving for, and what our market is, that really helps. And I I hate nothing more than having to like explain to to three people from the same company what we do because they didn't have that proper internal notes or handoff process. Um, and I think also just being, really transparent with the setbacks. If you're selling a product, what are the things that you don't do as well as maybe a more expensive competitor on the market, but maybe why it's not needed or what a workaround is to that missing feature. That gains a lot of respect for me is when you're just being honest about what are the weaknesses, or if you're a service provider, maybe you're a smaller agency, what are the weaknesses of or risks working with a smaller agency versus a larger, more established one.
Yeah. All right. I think this is a good advice also for people, for a lot of people who are selling stuff. Basically, we all sellers constantly, but you also need to understand the people you talk to. Yeah. Some other advice for entrepreneurs who are starting their own business. We say, right, if I would start over, all right, take into consideration that you need to focus on this one first. You mentioned already delegation.
Yeah.
Some other advices you have?
Took me, I would say 2 years to figure this out. Just the value of community for founders as well. So I've got a great community here in Medellin with a group called the Entrepreneur House, a great community in the US with a group called Hampton. And yeah, I mean, the founder journey is very lonely at times. A lot of the problems that you face as a founder are unique and dramatic that maybe when you talk to family members or friends, they don't really understand what you're going through. So I find it incredibly helpful to have founder peers that you can talk to. And I continue to be amazed, like when I go to these founder groups like Hampton and Entrepreneur House, and I come up to them with a problem that I think is so unique just to NeoWork, and no one else could be going through something similar. And yet I come out of these meetings with like 5 people having gone through the exact same problem, and them sharing the expensive mistakes that they made or what they wish they would have done differently, and it's actionable advice for me. So yeah, I think that's number one advice I would give to founders is, join a community, find your peer group, and don't keep those problems to yourself.
All right, share it with people. Talk about your problems, and let the advice make you to help you to make your decisions faster than you should have done
Exactly.
on your own. Yeah. All right, Joshua. Joshua, I really enjoyed the conversation, and to have a better understanding about what NeoWork does and what made you to the entrepreneur you are right now. So I would like to thank you again also for attending podcast Encrypted Minds to share your story. Um, I think let's keep in touch, and I like your business. I like you as a person, and yeah, let's see if you can have your AR companies in the near future to have the
Thank you
same
so much.
vision.
And I love what you're doing with level up sales. I think same question back to you. What would you say is the number one thing that salespeople should be adjusting in their pitches?
That's a nice question. You know, I think that the salespeople in general have maybe it's in the Netherlands. There's a lot of negativity around salespeople. There are distrust. They're not trusted everywhere because they seems to see your commission breath, that you're doing it for yourself. So I think that if I look back at all the deals I've done in the past, it comes to trustworthiness. And remember when you said you need to be honest also about the things you're not that good at. It also helps establish a relationship and also your authority. You're just as a human being also to help solving issues. And in cybersecurity, this my space in the Netherlands, the world is not that big. Now, as a matter of fact, I just had an interview last week with an entrepreneur from India who has a company based on a full suite of security tools, and he even knew the same people I know. So the world is small. So my advice is to be always to be honest, because you'll independently of the company you work for, you only have one head, that is your own name on it. And if it's trustworthy, then you will have more success in the near future. I think this is the most important advice I can give to other people in our industry. Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
little bit biased because my chief growth officer, Rob, is Dutch, but I think Dutch people make the best salespeople. And it's like, look at your history. You're very few wars ever, great negotiators, great traders. The Dutch West Indies Company, and throughout history, like really being able to form alliances. Yeah, having that consultative type sales approach of not trying to sell, but really partnering and helping them solve problems instead of just selling them things that they don't need.
Well, I like your partner already. I like Rob already because this is a great compliment. So thank you, Rob, for this exposure to the Dutch people. Yeah. Maybe it's something historically, I don't know, but you can be successful in our job if you are stay with your own standards and your motives. I think this is
Yeah,
important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Edwin, for the companies that you work with, what are your thoughts on their use of virtual assistants and remote-based talent?
Well, I like to work with remote assistants myself because they're incredibly talented, and you can have them for much less risk than hiring your own people. So I think for skill ups or startups, skill ups, it's a great benefit to make use of agencies like NeoWork. Um, w- why I like to have these kind of podcasts is that if I talk to people from the US, they are much more open to share what they've done wrong, and more importantly, what they've learned out of it. While you compare this to Europeans or maybe the Dutch, they're much more closed. So, and it seems maybe it is my misconception, but if you have failed as an entrepreneur in the US, people tend to think, "Well, good for you. You learned a couple of lessons. What are you good? What are you going to do next?" But if you compare it to our standards, all right, yeah, I warned you for this, right? Yeah, that is quite easy. But if I interviewing people from the US, we also see what's going to happen in our country a couple of years from now. The adaptation of new technologies like AI, other tools. If it works, you expand. If it doesn't work, you try something else. And I think that will be the same with AI and AR. How we can this combine in the near future. So if you start some new endeavors, I will take a close look at it, because you can almost predict what will happen in a couple of years from now in our country. Yeah,
Love
yeah,
it.
yeah. All right, Joshua, thank you for these kind questions. I really appreciate it, and I will suggest to stay in touch and see what NeoWork is going to do. And thank you again for attending Encrypted Minds.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for having me on. This was a pleasure.
Great. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.